Hello, everybody. So today we're going to finish up chapter 6. We're on lesson 6.11. And today, when we're working on our addition problems, we're going to be using two properties that we're familiar with. We are actually familiar with these from as early as third grade, maybe even earlier, but I'm certain in third grade. Commutative property basically states that the order in which we place the addends does not affect the sum. So I can go 1/2 and add 3/5 more, or I can start with 3/5 and add 1/2 more. The associative property, or the grouping property, states that it doesn't matter how you group the addends, you'll still get the same sum. So in this one, I have the sum of 2/9 and 1/8, and 3/8 added to it. And in the next one, I have 2/9 plus the sum of 1/8 and 3/8. Now, the reason we want to use commutative property is often to also use the associative property. We want to switch the order of two out of the three fractions so they're going to be closer to something with the same denominator. So, like in this problem here, they regrouped the 1/8 and 3/8 so that they would have similar denominators. Okay, so to start there. But we could have, if the 1/8 was on the other side of 2/9, if we had said 1/8 plus 2/9, and that was in parentheses, well, we could have switched the order with it using the commutative property and then wound up with this problem. Okay, so we're going to practice some of these, and by the end, I believe you should be able to explain this. So Jane and her family are driving to Big Lagoon State Park. On the first day, they travel a third of the total distance. On the second day, they travel a third of the total distance in the morning, and then 1/6 of the total distance in the afternoon. How much of the total distance has Jane's family driven by the end of the second day? Well, basically, we have 1/3 the first day plus the second day. Well, in the second day, they did 1/3 in the morning, 1/6 in the afternoon. But maybe we don't want to do this one. I see that this one is 1/3 and this is 1/3, so those denominators are easier to add. So I want to rearrange these, and I want to group the 1/3s together and leave 1/6 for last. Well, in this case, now we see quickly that 1/3 plus 1/3 is 2/3. Now we have 2/3 plus 1/6, and now we do have to find a common denominator. Well, 3 can become 6, right? By multiplying by 2. 2 over 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 2 is 6. So 2/3, an equivalent fraction for 2/3, is 4/6. All right, so now we can rewrite 2/3 plus 1/6 as 4/6 plus 1/6. So 4/6 and 1/6 is 5/6. So they've driven 5/6 of the total distance by the end of the second day. All right, 296. Here's another example. So we're going to add this problem. The sum of 2 and 5/8 and 1 and 2/3 added with 1 and 1/8. Or you can read this as 1 and 1/8 added to the sum of 2 and 5/8 and 1 and 2/3. Well, when I look at this one, I see this has an eighth and this has an eighth. Well, it'd be nice if we put those two together, right? To make it easier to add. But right now, the 1 and 2/3 is, in a sense, in the way. It's blocking it. It's acting like a barrier. But why don't we switch places with these? What property allows us to switch the order? The commutative property does. So let's just switch the order of the 2 and 5/8 and the 1 and 2/3. So let's put 1 and 2/3 first, 2 5/8, and then 1 1/8. Okay, now you see that if I want to regroup, they'd be next to each other. So we use commutative property just to flip the direction so that 2 5/8 was closer to 1 1/8. So now let's rewrite our problem. And we're going to regroup by putting 2 5/8 and 1 1/8 in parentheses. Okay, you notice that now 1 2/3 is no longer inside the parentheses. Okay, so we're grouping the eighths. All right, well, we're going to rewrite 1 2/3. Okay, but we're going to simplify this. Well, 2 and 1 is 3, and 5 and 1 is 6. So we have 3 6/8. Well, I can't add thirds and eighths. So I'm going to multiply the 2/3 by 8/8 to get 1 16/24. I'll multiply the 6/8 by thirds. Okay, remember, we can find a common denominator by just multiplying opposite denominators. So I multiply the thirds by eighths, and I'm going to multiply the eighths by thirds. And that gives me 18/24. So we're going to have 1 16/24 plus 3 18/24. Well, 3 and 1 is 4, and 16 and 18 is 34/24. Well, I can't leave 34/24 like that because that's a fraction greater than 1. So let's go ahead and divide the fraction part. The numerator is the dividend. The denominator is the divisor. I can take 124 from 34 with a remainder of 10. So I get 1 10/24. But I can simplify 10/24 by dividing by 2. So I actually have 1 5/12 plus the 4 whole number here. So 4 and 1 is 5 5/12. All right, let's try this problem, part A. So let's look at these three add-ins. We have 5 1/4, 3/4, and 1 5/12. Well, I think I want to add the fourths together. That seems to be the easiest one to start with. So how am I going to group 5 1/4 with 3/4? Because remember, according to the order of operations, I have to add what's in parentheses first. But we can switch the parentheses if we want by using the associative property. Okay, so all I did was I grouped the fourths differently. Now 1 5/12 is not grouped with 3/4 any longer. All right, so let's add these. 5 3/4 plus 1/4 is 4/4. Well, 4/4 is equal to 1, right? So 5 plus 1 is 6. Remember, it's 5 plus 4/4, and 4/4 is 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. So 6 plus 1 5/12. And we'll just add that. 7 5/12. 6 and 1, 7. 5/12 plus no fraction is 5/12. All right, B. 1/5 plus 3/10 plus 2/5. I want to add the fifths. But right now, 3/10 is in the middle. So let's switch the order of these so that the fifths are next to each other. So we're going to have 3/10 plus 1/5 plus 2/5. All right. So what property allowed me to do that? That was the commutative property. Okay, now I can use the associative property to group 1/5 and 2/5. And the associative property or grouping property is what allows us to do that. So 1/5 plus 2/5 is 3/5. Well, I can't add tenths and fifths, but hopefully you recognize that fifths can turn into tenths by multiplying by 2. So 3 tenths plus 6 tenths is 9 tenths. Okay, 9's prime. The factors of 9 are 3 and 3, and 3 and 3 are not factors of 10. So we are in simplest form there for part B. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Use the properties and mental math to solve. Write your answer in simplest form. Okay, so here I see eighths, sixths, eighths. Well, I want to add the eighths. But right now the 5/6 is standing in between them. So I can't just regroup. Okay, because if I regrouped, I would have 5/6 plus 1 and 1/8. That didn't help me any. So I want to switch the order first. Okay, so I'm going to put 5/6 first, then 2 and 5/8. Keep those in parentheses because I want to do one step at a time. And that's the commutative property. Okay, so the commutative property allows us to switch the order. Now we're going to regroup. And I'm going to join 2 and 5/8 with 1 and 1/8. And that's the associative property. Which allows us to change the grouping. Okay, now 5/6 is on the outside, and we've grouped the eighths together. All right, so let's simplify. 2 and 5/8 plus 1 and 1/8 is 3 and 6/8. Well, we don't have a common denominator for the sixth and the eighths. So what can the sixths and the eighths become? 6, 12, 18, 24. I recognize that 8 can become 24. 8, 16, 24. So 5/6 times 4 over 4. An equivalent fraction for 5/6 is 20 24ths plus 3 and 6/8 times 3 thirds. That would give us 3 and 18 24ths. 20 24ths plus 18 24ths is 38 24ths. 3 plus nothing is 3. So we have 3 and 28 24ths. We're going to want to simplify the 38 24ths by dividing. That would leave me 1 in the quotient with a remainder of 14. So 1 and 14 24ths plus 3. 3 plus 1 and 14 24ths. What can go into both 14 and 24? 2. So we have 4 and 2 twelfths. I'm sorry, 7 twelfths. 14 divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. And 24 divided by 2 is 12. So 4 and 7 twelfths. Okay, number 2. I'm going to go ahead and do number 2 on a separate sheet of paper. I noticed that got a little cramped at the end. So let's look at number 2 on a separate sheet of paper. 5 twelfths plus the sum of 5 twelfths and 3 fourths. Well, gee, wouldn't it be nice to add the twelfths together instead of twelfths and the fourths to start? So let's regroup that. Okay, what property is this showing? All I did was switch the grouping symbols, right? So that's the associative property of addition. All right, now let's simplify. 5/12 and 5/12 is 10/12 plus 3/4. Okay, well, fourths and 12ths now are not similar, but I can multiply 3/4 by 3 over 3, right? To get 12ths. So that would be 9/12. So 10/12 plus 9/12. Okay, 9/12 is the equivalent fraction for 3/4. All we did is rename 3/4 as 9/12. So 10/12 plus 19/12, 9/12 is 19/12. Let's divide that because that's a fraction greater than 1. I can take 1/12 from 19 with a remainder of 7. So 1 and 7/12. Number 3. We have the sum of 3 and 1/4 and 2 and 5/6 plus 1 and 3/4. So looking at this, the easiest to add together would be the fourths. But the 2, 5, 6 is in the way. So let's switch the order of these two. Okay, so what allowed us to change the order? The commutative property of addition. Now I want to go ahead and group those two together. So I'm just going to put the grouping symbols around the fourths and leave 2 and 5/6 on the outside. I'm going to rewrite 2 and 5/6, and I'm going to simplify this. 3 plus 1 is 4, and 1/4 plus 3/4 is 4/4. Well, what does 4/4 equal? 4/4 is the same as 1, right? So 4 plus 4/4 is the same as 5. All right, so 5 plus 2 and 5/6, 7 and 5/6. Okay, number 4. Use the properties and mental map to solve. Write your answer in simplest form. All right, so we have the sum of 2/7 and 1/3 plus 2/3. Well, don't you want to add the the thirds together? Sure. So they're already next to each other. I don't have to change anybody's order. So let's just change how they're grouped. We want to put parentheses around the thirds because we want to add those first. Okay. I don't want to add 2/7 and 1/3 first. I want to add the 2/3 together. So 2/7 plus 1/3 plus 2/3. Well, that's 3/3, right? 3/3 is equal to 1, right? So we have 2/7 plus 1. 1 and 2/7. Let's go back to here. What property were we dealing with here that allowed us to change the grouping? Associative property, right? Okay. And then we just simplify. Number 5. The sum of 1/5 and 1/2 plus 2/5. Well, I want to get that 1/5 with this 2/5. So right now the 1/2's in the way. So let's switch the order of these two fractions. Put the 1/2 first, put the 1/2 second, 1/5 second, and the 2/5 third. Okay, so right now all we did was switch the order. The property that allows us to change the order without changing the sum is the commutative property. All right, what's one? Now we're going to use the associative property to join 2/5 and 1/5. One half plus 1/5 plus 2/5. That's 3/5. Well, we can multiply both of these denominators by the opposite denominator. So 1/2 times fifths and 3/5 times halves. So 1/5 is 5/10. 1/2 times 5/5 is 5/10. Plus 3 times 2/2 is 6/10. 3/5 times 2/2 is 6/10. If we add those together, we'll get 11/10. That is a fraction greater than 1. We're not going to leave it like that. So I'm going to divide 11 by 10. I have a quotient of 1 with a remainder of 1. The remainder is the numerator, and the divisor 10 is the denominator. So 1 and 1/10. Number 6. Right now we have the sum of 1/6 and 3/7 plus 2/7. Well, we want those two together because they have sevenths. So I just want to change the order or the grouping. I don't want to change the order. I want to change the grouping. Okay. I didn't change the order. I have the same exact fractions in the same exact order. All I did was change how they're grouped. So this is the same. This is the associative property that allows us to do that. And so we'd have 1/6 plus 5/7. Well, these don't have like denominators, so I will multiply 1/6 by 7/7, and I'll multiply 5/7 by 6/6. 1/6 times 7/7 is 7/42, and 5/7 plus 6/6 is 30/42. If we add them together, we'd get 37/42. 37 is a prime number, and 37 is not a factor of 42. So 37 out of 42 parts. Number 7. We have the sum of 2 and 5/12. 2 and 5/12 plus 4 and 1/4. Plus 1/4. All right. Well, as I look at this, I have 12ths, 4ths, and 4ths. Well, let's put those two together. They're already next to each other. Let's just change the grouping. All right. Again, that was the associative property of addition. All right, what's 1/4 plus 1/4? 2/4. 4 plus nothing is 4. So we have 4 and 2/4 plus 2 and 5/12. What can we multiply fourths by to get 12ths? We can multiply 2/4 by 3/3. 2 times 3 is 6, and 4 times 3 is 12. So an equivalent fraction of 4 2/4 is 4 6/12. 6 plus 5 is 11 twelfths. So 5 twelfths plus 6 twelfths is 11 twelfths. And 2 plus 4 is 6. 11's prime. 11's not a factor of 12. So 6 and 11 twelfths. Number 8. Number 8, you have 1 1/8 plus the sum of 5 1/2 and 2 3/8. Well, this is eighths, halves, eighths. Let's put the eighths together. Well, I just can't change the grouping symbols, so I'm going to have to change the order of those two first. Okay, so now we have 2 3/8 closer to 1 1/8, and we did that by using the commutative property. Commutative property of addition. Now we're going to use the associative property to group them together, the eighths together, and then add the 5 1/2. So that's the associative property. All right, so 1/8 plus 3/8, that's 4/8. 1 plus 2 is 3. So 3 4/8 plus 5 1/2. Well, I can change halves into eighths by multiplying by 4. So we have 3 4/8 plus 5 4/8. Well, that's going to be 8 8/8. 8/8 is the same as 1. 8 plus 8/8, 8 plus 1 equals 9. Number 9. Number 9, you have 5 9ths plus the sum of 1 9th and 4 5ths. Okay, well, we clearly want to add the ninths together. There's nothing in the way of them except for the fact that by order of operations, we have to add what's in parentheses first. So why don't we regroup, change the parentheses so that we can add 5 9ths and 1 9th first, and then add the 4 5ths. Well, 5 9ths plus 1 9th is 6 9ths plus 4 5ths. We can multiply the ninths by fifths and the fifths by ninths. Okay. So all we're doing is finding like denominators, multiplying the 9 and the 5 together. All right, so 6 times 5 is 30, and 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 4 is 36 45ths. Add these together, we are going to get 66 45ths. Well, 6 plus 6 is 12, which means it's divisible by 3. And 4 plus 5 is 9, which means it's also divisible by 3. So let's go ahead and reduce both of these by 3. 66 divided by 3 is 22. And 45 divided by 3 is 15. So 22 15ths. But I still can't leave it like that because that's a fraction greater than 1. So divide 22 by 15. We can take one set of 15s away from 22. with a remainder of 7. So 1 and 7/12. Not 7/12. Um, there is no 12 in this problem. Okay. So I divided 22 by 15. That gave me 1. I subtracted 15 from 22. That gave me a remainder of 7. The remainder is the numerator. 15 is the denominator. So 1 and 7/15 for number 9. 1 and 7/15. All right, let's look at number 10. And I'm going to continue using scratch paper just to make sure I have space to do the work. All right, number 10. Julie rides her bike from the sports complex to the school. From the sports complex to the school. That's 2/3 mile. Okay, then she rides from the school to the mall. Okay, well, that would be 2/5 mile. And then on to the library. And that would be 1 and 1/3 mile. All right, so right now we have 2/3 plus the sum of 2/5 and 1 and 1/3. I want to add the thirds. So I'm going to change the order using the commutative property of addition. And I'm now going to regroup so that the thirds will get added first. And that's using the associative property. 2/3 plus 1/3 is 3/3. We know that 3/3 is the same as 1. So 1 plus 3/3 is 2. 2 plus 2/5. Funny what your brain will do to you. 2 plus 2/5 is 2 and 2/5. All right, so Julie rides her bike 2 and 2/5 mile. So that's Julie. Now we have to look at Kyle. Kyle rides his bike from his house to the mall. From his house to the mall is 4/5 mile. And then to the library. So bike from his house to the mall and then to the library. So then he's going to go 1 and 1/3 from there. Let me put Kyle. Okay, so Kyle. We're comparing these two because it says who rides farther. And then we have to figure out how many miles farther. All right, so we know right now that Julie travels 2 and 2/5 mile. We have to figure out Kyle. All right, well, we don't have a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply 4/5 by 3/3, and I'll multiply the 1/3 by 5/5. So a common denominator would be 15ths. So 12/15 plus 1 and 5/15. Well, that would be 1 and 17/15. Can't leave 17/15 like that, so we would divide. And we'd have 1 and 2/15. 1 and 2/15 plus 1. 1 and 2/15 plus the original 1 from the 1 and 17/15 would give me 2 and 2/15. So we're comparing 2 and 2/15 to 2 and 2/5. Well, it's going to be easier to compare if we change the 2/5 into a like denominator. 5 times what is 15? 3. So 2/5 is the same as 6/15. So 2 and 6/15 compared to 2 and 2/15. So Julie writes farther. Julie writes farther. How much farther? Well, she's at 2 and 6/15. He's at 2 and 2/15. We can just subtract those two. 6 take away 2 is 4. So 6/15 minus 2/15 is 4/15. And 2 take away 2, that's just 0. So she just rides 4/15 more mile more. Number 11. On one afternoon, Mario walks from his house to the library. Mario walks from his house to the library. Okay, so the library's here, and it's showing us the distance of 1 3/5 mile. All right, so that was from his house to the library. That evening, Mario walked from the library to the mall, which is 1 1/3 mile, and then to Kyle's house, which is 4/5 mile. Okay. So this is what I have right now. Okay, and it says, describe how you can use the properties to find how far Mario walks. Well, we want to add the 4/5 to the 3/5. So the first thing I would do is use the commutative property. Then I would use the associative property. To group the fifths together. All right, and 4/5 and 3/5 is 7/5, and 1 plus nothing is 1, plus 1 and 1/3. Okay, well, they don't have a like denominator, so I'm going to multiply 1 and 7/5 by 3/3. And I'll multiply the 1/3 by 5/5. So equivalent denominator is 15ths. Now we can just add the fractions. 21 plus 5 will give me 26/15. 1 and 1 is 2. Well, you can't leave 26/15. So let's change that to a mixed number. And we're going to subtract. We get left with 11. So 26/15 is the same as 1 and 11/15. So 2 plus 1 and 11/15 is 3 and 11/15. Okay, so what did we do first? So first, use the commutative property. To change the order. Of 1 1/3 and 4/5 to 4/5 plus 1 and 1/3. Then apply the associative property. To get 1 3/5 plus 4/5 plus 1 1/3. then add and simplify. All right, so again, first thing I did was use the community property because I wanted to change the order of the 1 1/3 and the 4/5, so that I had 4/5 plus 1 1/3. Then the associative property so that I could group the fifths together and then add the 1/3. All right, number 12. Kyle is adding distances between the school and the mall and the park, and the mall and his house. He writes 2/5 plus 2/3 plus 4/5. Rewrite his expression using properties so the fractions are easier to add. Okay, so if this is what he has right now, well, we want to add the fifths. So let's change the order of the 2/3 and the 4/5. And then we're going to rewrite that so that 2/5 and 4/5 are grouped plus 2/3. Okay, it didn't say anything about adding them, so we'll just leave it there. And 13. For 13a through 13c, tell whether each expression was rewritten using the commutative property or the associative property. All right. So you see the equal sign. So let's compare the left-hand side of the equal sign to the right-hand side. 9/10, 9/10, 3/10, 3/10, 5/6, 5/6. Well, that eliminates commutative property because all the add-ins are in the same exact order. So it can't be commutative. It's got to be associative. Well, let's see. Right now, the grouping symbols are around 3/10 and 5/6. On this side, it's around 3/10 and 9/10. So yes, they changed the grouping. Now let's look at B. 3/4 and 1/5. Well, okay, something's happened here. They don't have the same order. I do have the same fractions, but they're in opposite orders here. So this, on this side, 3/4 is first, and on this side, 1/5 is first. So they used the commutative property. The 1/5 and the 3/4 are still in the same grouping symbols. They've just been switched places. And C, 3.5, 3.5. 2 1/8, 2 1/8. 1 5/8, 1 5/8. Can't be commutative property. Same exact add-in, same exact order. The only difference is what's in between the parentheses. On this side, 3.5 is grouped with 2 1/8. On this side, the 2 1/8 is grouped with 1 5/8. So that's the associative property. All right, so that's it for our discussion of adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. As we move on to chapter 7, we're going to be working on multiplying fractions. So until our first lesson of chapter 7, I will see you soon.